call upon my panelist. Let me begin with Dr. Vishwadeep Goyal. Dr. Vishwadeep Goyal is currently the Zonal Director, Fortis Hospitals, Ludhiana and Amritsar, where he is driving the next phase of a growth for the two hospitals. He was previously the Chief Operating Officer and Unit Head at Apollo Ahmedabad under the Apollo Hospitals International in Ahmedabad, India. He was also associated with Shalby, where he turned the new Greenfield project profitable and got a NABH accreditation and strengthened the clinical departments. Besides the private sector, he also has considerable experience in public health system as well. He has worked as a medical officer and a nodal officer, RSBY Insurance Project and Employee State Insurance Healthcare, Government of Haryana from 2006 until 2012. Please welcome Dr. Vishwadeep Goyal. So there's an interesting thing that our lighting design fraternity offered us to contribute one of their stalwart to come and join us. So this was a very unique concept where we also have a lighting design pavilion, and while we were interacting with them, they said we will send one of our representative in each of the pavilion. So the lighting design has a contribution in each pavilion because lighting is one of the most important aspect of architecture and a built environment. So today we have Ranjith Kartha, a young lighting designer who's offered us to come and join us here. He's a founder and principal designer at Veda Lighting Design and leads its design growth efforts. He brings over 20 years of entrepreneurial experience in lighting design and product development in India, the UAE and the USA. He holds a master's degree in lighting from the world's leading school in lighting Research Center, LRC, at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, Troy, New York. So please welcome Ranjith. He's going to be with us over here. And then of course I have one of my most coveted colleague, the name in the MEP industry, which is a third generation legacy of his MEP industry, Mr. K. Ramachandran. So Ramachandran doesn't need any introduction, but he is an HVAC icon with more than 40 years of experience. I think every architect in our nation knows about him. With 20 years of contracting experience, he joined ESKAYEM Consultants Private Limited, a premier consultancy organization rendering professional consultancy in the field of building services as a director and senior associate. He was the managing director of ESKAYEM when he retired from active consultancy in March 2021. He is an active member of the Indian Society of Heating, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Engineering. All of us we know Shikre since 1984 and has served society as its national president in the year 2015 and 16. Currently, he is an advisor to the Shikre's Technical Committee. I would also request Dr. Desai to come here. I'm going to stand because I would prefer to stand and begin with this panel discussion. So my first question is to the operating man, Dr. Vishwadeep Goyal. Having a strong experience of 16 years in the healthcare management and administration, can you kindly elaborate on your past experience, especially in the recent COVID times as a COO, and what would be your suggestions to the designers, medical planners and the promoters of a healthcare industry for enhancing the quality, productivity and the efficiency from the COO perspective?
Thank you very much. So I would say COVID was really a very historic moment, not only for the mankind. Of course, for the hospitals, it was one of the most difficult things that could have ever happened to us. It was a watershed moment for the hospitals. And the last 2 years have really taught us so much about design and architecture as well. As operators, we really never would think of it. In fact, as an operating person, we actually come into play when everything has already been done, when the project is designed, when everything is completed. That's only we come in, and typically what we do is then find faults. We find ways in which we kind of keep telling the projects that this is what we wanted, but this is not there. But this time, so during COVID, a lot of changes had to be made in the way we operated. A lot of changes had to be made in terms of what are the requirements, real requirements of this disease. And there was so much of uncertainty, there was so much of gap in terms of what we knew about this disease as such. And that led us to kind of collaborate with our people. So the projects team, the engineering, the doctors, they came together to kind of work out solutions which will work best for us. And I think some of the things that we really learned around this time was segregation. So how do we isolate patients who are more infected? We always had some beds reserved for these patients, but those were very, very limited. So this disease actually taught us that an entire hospital might require a majority of its bed to be in terms of infectious diseases, and only a limited beds may then be required for the other patients. I think that is something which I believe is going to be the way forward. We already saw some of these things in the presentations that we saw in terms of how do we segregate patients, the OPD into IPD. Within the IPDs as well, how do we segregate the infectious patients differently? So we saw the positive and the negative pressures. So typically in the past, the hospitals would have only 1 or 2 or 3 negative pressure rooms, but now we are looking at much more. So that is something which is really going to come up, and that's what I believe that the hospitals of future will require to integrate. And also in terms of the adaptability. So we saw the entire hospitals being set up, and we have seen a very good example in Mumbai. So that is probably something which also will have to be integrated into the systems and the designs. Can we change a hospital or a part of a hospital into something else? So this time it is COVID, it may be something else entirely different next time. So we'll have to be really agile about that. So to be adaptable, to be able to make those changes very quickly. And some of the designs, I mean, we are already seeing those things happening without obstructing the existing hospital services. If we have the systems in place, either from the outside or from the inside, where we don't need to change anything dramatically, and we are able to plug in something, I think that is something which I feel is going to make a difference. Efficiency, of course, green buildings is another thing that the hospitals have now taken up. It's not only the hospitals and the management that is interested in that. Even the patients also desire that. So there is a lot of effort to make the hospital sustainable, and I think that's where the green building concept, the IGBC and other associations are working on that. Those things are becoming very, very important, and those are the things which will have to be considered much more in future as we go and as we design more hospitals.
I mean, during the COVID time, it was quite surprising for us. Most of the state-of-art tertiary care centers were not COVID compliant. It was really an eye-opener. When people were trying to see those healthcare facilities and they realized that they were not adaptable. So very good message that you gave. And I feel one of the important aspects which we didn't touch today, Rahul, is a wayfinding. Because wayfinding plays a very important role, especially in a large hospital. That's what we learned when we designed Kokalaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital. Because when people come in there, they are already under some stress, trauma, and if they keep asking people where is this and where is that, so the wayfinding plays a very important role, and there are so many other things. Taking a thread from you about the adaptability and about the infection control, one of the most important aspects of a healthcare is a MEP. I would now move on to Mr. Ramachandran, and I would ask him, it's a very subjective question, but please address us for all of our knowledge. Indoor environmental quality, infection control is extremely critical for healthcare functioning. How do you ensure that these aspects are very well planned at the design stage, very well executed at the execution stage, and also ensure that they are behaving the similar way it is executed in operation stage? So design stage, execution stage, and operational stage about IEQ.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sandeep. Basically, we associate air conditioning with comfort. Even in a hospital, air conditioning is primarily for patient comfort, and patient healing, as assistance in healing, is a byproduct. But there is something far more important in a hospital environment which air conditioning can do. That is basically infection control. Hospital-acquired infection is really the bane of the hospitals. Just now, when Dr. Desai was presenting here, he had a slide with hospital-acquired infection. Ranjith, who I met first time today and who was sitting next to me, turned to me and said, "My father lost an eye due to hospital. My father lost an eye due to hospital infection." See, we always think that this happened to others. It is a very real thing. If you go into a hospital with but one illness, you can very well come out of that place with another illness. It is very possible. Now, how is infection control? Infection can, in a hospital, there is a very peculiar situation that you are having infectious patients on one side and immunocompromised patients on the other side. Immunocompromisation could be either due to the illness or it can be even due to the medication that they are taking. Now, it is very easy for the immunocompromised patients to catch the infection to the infectious patients. So what is very necessary is that they should be segregated through a pressure differential, and that is where the HVAC system comes into the picture. Now, frankly, this is not rocket science. If you are able to maintain the infectious patients in a negative pressure area, the infection just will not come out. Air, when you open the door, air will only go inside. Conversely, when the immunocompromised patient should be in a positive pressure area, so that when the door is open, air will only come out and infection will not go in. So the whole idea of this infection control is to segregate the patients appropriately and have positive pressure and negative pressure respectively in those areas. Like I said, it is no rocket science to maintain positive pressure. All you have to do is to pump in more air than is being exhausted. And conversely, for negative pressure, you exhaust more air than that is being pumped in. It can be it can be done very fundamentally. Any basic air conditioning engineer can do this. Now, one thing to my architect friends who are sitting here, my only request is please provide adequate space. Because when you are talking about these kind of systems, there are fans, there are monitors, controls, ducting. Please provide adequate space for this paraphernalia which comes to maintain the positive and negative pressure. I like the second part of the question which he posed. How do you ensure that this is maintained? That was the second part, isn't it? How do you ensure that this is maintained? Now, even in well-designed corporate hospitals, big hospitals, major hospitals, you don't find adequate monitoring of pressures. Now, it is a very simple thing to monitor the pressure, differential pressure between two areas by just providing a small meter there. And these days with IoT, it can all be integrated, it can be recorded, it can be monitored centrally. And it costs just a small fraction of what you are spending on the hospital. Very small, negligible fraction, I would say. But this is absent. So in the absence of monitoring system, what happens? You really do not know whether exhaust fan is working or not, or if the supply fan is working at the design speed. The monitoring system is critical to maintain the pressure differential, which will go a long way for infection control. That is all I have to say. Over to you, Sandeep.
So I think a POE, post-occupancy evaluation, is catching up. And I feel healthcare should be the first industry to propagate the POE. Like you could be seeing now in London, they are mapping all the healthcare facilities and they're rating them. Those rating system is public domain. Like this healthcare facility is observing all of this infection control, the life and fire safety, the operational standards. This is some message to Dr. Goyal for you. You are coming from a leading healthcare facility. You should promote and encourage this kind of a post-occupancy evaluation so people will feel safe, and it will also give you that premium perception. Because I would say that all of us as an architect, designers, we spend a lot of time and energy while the project is on. But once the project is complete, we move on. We really don't know how is it functioning. It's very important to also capture that functioning of the hospital, learn some lessons out of that. The feedback would give it back to the fraternity to update it more. That's what I feel. So moving on to Ranjith, of course, we want to hear from you. Lighting design has a great importance, as I mentioned, and a therapeutic influence on the mental wellness as well as doctors' wellness and also the support staff. What do you see are the contribution of your profession and how it can make design spaces better for the healthcare buildings?
Thank you, Sandeep. It was quite encouraging that the first statement you mentioned that you really wanted to implant a
lighting design
in your team, and I think for all the participants here, we are a very small fraternity and maybe the newest consultancy guys out here in part of the built environment. Maybe 80 to 100 of us all India. 10 years back when I started this consulting, it was just 20 of us. So we are slowly growing. People are realizing the importance of lighting. When it comes to hospitals, now from a commercial sense, we are finding it so difficult to even convince an architect or sometimes an interior designer or a client to hire us for a hospitality project or a residential project, which is quite a straightforward place where you think you will need good lighting. But when we look at hospitals, the first place is what does a lighting designer do in a hospital? Because sometimes people associate lighting design with, creating effects, all those RGB color changing, mood settings. That's what people suddenly associate a lighting designer for. But there is so much of research on lighting and health. Now, I personally also, when I did my master's, 2 years was purely on lighting and health and circadian rhythms. So, and when you do a master's abroad, it's typically just reading a lot of thesis papers from all your, nearby universities, Harvard Medical School and all these guys. So there's so much of research today which establishes the fact of lighting and its impact on our human health. So there is, again, we have to be pragmatic in dividing. There's a lot of misinformation also today, especially in the corporate world, where there's a lot of circadian lighting being sold as a part of branding by many brands. Now, I don't really pick up those things at all, because they use that catchword, okay, my product is circadian rhythm oriented and stuff like that. So that's a lot of misinformation there. Then there is the real fact backed by research, which says that yes, there are certain parameters or certain conditions where lighting impacts you. Now, I would think that before we even looking at a space, we should look at lighting from as if you are looking. Now, for example, if you're looking at weight loss, weight loss is $1 billion industry today, right? But it's very simple, right? If you want to lose weight, you eat well, you eat the right food, you eat at the right time, the right quantity. If you can just manage your psychology and just do that on a daily basis, you are already pretty healthy, because only 20% is your exercise, 80% is your what you consume. Similarly, we need to arrive at a lighting diet, I would think. Because though before we start looking at designing lighting for hospital spaces, that's the end point where you end as a patient. But how do you prevent yourself from being a patient? That's also where lighting plays a big role. So when I say a lighting diet, it's like being aware or mindful about your daily exposure to light and darkness patterns. So from the time you wake up, what time do you wake up? When you wake up, are you exposed to enough sunlight? Are you exposed to enough daylight? Now, the same circadian concept. You go to an office, there is this idea of having circadian light, blue color, and all those things. But if you do a proper 1 hour workout outside, now India is blessed with a lot of sunlight. Yes, it might be relevant to a place like New York or somewhere where you have a lot of, a kind of a dull environment in the morning during winters. But India, we have 365 days, ample amount of daylight. I don't think anyone in India should suffer from circadian related issues. If you can just get out there and walk for 1 hour every day morning, and get enough sunlight. So these are what circadian science talks about, setting your bio clock right in the morning. So once you set your bio clock with enough daylight, because eye has a non-visual element, eye also sees, and involuntarily it also senses the amount of visual light in your environment, and it sends cues to your brain, like something called suprachiasmatic nucleus, which then connects to your pineal gland, which then secretes melatonin. Now the quantity of melatonin affects your serotonin. Serotonin is what gives you the alertness component. So melatonin kicks off in the night, while serotonin is in the morning. So these imbalances of hormone is what really, it's exactly like a diet issue. You keep eating junk food, over a period of time you accumulate fat, you become obese, you become diabetic, then you end up in a hospital. Similarly, when you are not exposed to proper patterns of light over a long period of time, there is research which says it can lead to cancer. I will not say lighting is directly proportional to cancer, but it can definitely be a proponent, or it can enhance your chances of a cancer if you are already prone to it. Similarly, cardiac issues. When you don't sleep at the right time, what happens in circadian science is your body has a body clock which commands your system to reduce the activity, lowers your body temperature at night, so that there is a regeneration of cells happening at night. Now, what happens if you're not exposed to proper darkness? Even if you don't eat, if you eat well, but still if you don't sleep well, you're still going to be obese. So these are, I'm just, Sandeep, I'm just taking all these topics just to set the context of what exactly is lighting and health, before we get into the physical space. Now, coming to a hospital environment, now lately I've been involved in New Delhi with a very large hospital chain. It's a 2,000 bed hospital we are involved with. When we came on board, the first question by a lot of doctors and management team was, why do you need a lighting designer? We know lighting, it's technical stuff. What is there to do design? But then when I started talking to them and I was researching for that project, the NBC guidelines, and here I think it was created in 1970s or something like that, and it's never been updated, 70s or 80s. And all these science of circadian systems and all that, for example, now above a patient bed, I'll give you an example. Above a patient bed, ideally you should have at least 800 lux to 1000 lux. When I told that to that team, they were shocked. Ranjith, any hospital you show me in Delhi with more than 300 lux, it's not, you shouldn't have 1000 lux. But then it is important because for a patient, there are two things to it. Now, if you even look at a hospital, there are three basic user groups, right? One is the patient group or the inpatients who are probably a infant, like your newborns to 90-year-olds. So there's a huge age bracket of people who are using the services as a patient. Then there are doctors and nurses. Then there are students, post MD doctoral students. So 21 years age to 75-year-old doctors. So do you think that a 300 lux of light for a 21-year-old is equal to the same for a 70-year-old doctor? It can't be, right? I'm sure your retina's sensitivity to light reduces over a period of time. So a 300 lux on the table for a 21-year-old is not equal to 300 lux for a 70-year-old. You'll have to ramp it up to 600 lux at least for that 60-year-old doctor to get the same perception. So look at the chances of error, because a lot of hospitals, patients die because of errors more than actual sickness. It's errors which cause a lot of deaths. I'm sure as a doctor in the commercial sense, you are aware of what's happening across. So lighting has these huge impacts on a multi-pronged level, and I think we need to address it. And I think as lighting designers, we need to sensitize people to set the tone for this. Now, nurses, so much of research, when you have nurses 24/7 shifts, there was research in the US which said you have to provide restrooms for nurses who are through these shifts so that they can sleep properly and reset their bioclocks. Otherwise, what happens is you are taking an insulin. You're going looking into a syringe. Instead of 20 mg, you're going to take 30 mg. And so these are at a global level the problems that lighting and health has impact on the healthcare segment.
Yes, I think you have actually answered both of my questions. That was my second part of question, but good. The circadian cycle, of course, has an influence not only in healthcare, also on your day-to-day practice. So as an architect and designer, we used to always look at LPD, which is called lighting power density, because every 1 watt contributes to 0.4 watt to HVAC. So we have graduated to the level whereby we'll have a automation, we'll have a daylight cycle and ensure that our lux levels are matching with the outdoor ambient lighting. Now, these are the very important aspect which has a straight relation with the productivity, mental health and so on. I'm going to come to you again about color temperature and some of the other new age technologies, but very well answered. I move to Dr. Desai. Your presentation has actually encompassed most of the principal guidelines, but yet I would give you a floor to elaborate more to everybody. And my favorite question is, what needs to be done pre-design, design, execution and operation stage from your wealth of experience? What would be your advice to the entire fraternity, not only architect but also to the promoters and also to the facility managers?
So I think one thing which I have learned over this 25 years of practice is that India, we don't, follow a systematic manner or a systemic approach to certain things. Design is one of them. Especially when it comes to people like us, because for us, spaces are important, from guidelines also. So first thing to do is get into making an architectural briefing document, functional space program. Without that, we don't start. Because then you will miss out on dirty utility, clean utility, simple things which are there, and then you keep on fighting where to put that. So that has to be signed off. It is best to do it with some user from the client side also. If he doesn't have, then you can educate them. That's the number one. Number two, I will flow, in maybe the 4 disciplines which come into design, architecture being the first. So number one is form should follow function. That is the key. So it will be nice to do futuristic architecture, but it should follow, the function. The function should not get cramped because I went and did something, in a shape which probably doesn't fit into the function. Maybe circle, maybe cantilevering it, in some manner. That is one. The second is we generally talk about, environment and all of that, but when it comes down to implementing it, most of us forget the orientation and those kind of things. It was very nice to see that we have that has to be there, otherwise it makes no sense to talk about it. So that's the second thing which is there. In architecture, like I said, 8 to 9 meter grid is what we work with. There could be others also, but that fits in most of it. The trade-off has to be expenditure goes up the wider the grid, right? So you need to trade that off. We lost a Fortis hospital project because we went with a higher grid and they said that it's going to cost us this much. We cannot, So that's this flip point. But now I think India has moved, way ahead of that. The other thing is, very few would say about segregation of traffic, the way you explained. You need to have those vertical cores planned in a manner that segregates staff patient movement. Otherwise you are going to be in a mess. Okay? And give the privacy to the doctors to move in a corridor in a vertical situation where they don't crisscross with the patient. Otherwise, they will have a problem in that. Then, from moving to the other angle of say HVAC, and like he said, we generally don't give them spaces and we ask the moon from them. That's not going to be possible. Okay, if an air handling unit needs 160 square feet to 200 square feet, you better give them. If you don't give them today, tomorrow you are going to face the music because you can't service it, can't remove the filter, you can't drain the water. You are in for big time trouble. Okay, so we have to fight for it, with people like them, that we need it, whether you like it or you don't like it, it has to work, the system has to work. So please don't, so the thumb rule generally is you will end up about, 40% of your overall built area into circulation, services and those kind of things. So please keep that in mind. Don't try and cut it the Bombay way. So Bombay is theek, we have crunch of space, so we probably tend to do that, but now things are very clear. You need 8 feet corridors, 2 meter wide staircases, 2 staircases in a building. You can't just get away with it. So please don't, try and do that. Then in terms of the other thing in electrical and others, if you have certain, stipulations to follow, please do that. Don't cut short, because in the longer run, you will have problems. The number of plug points to an ICU bed, for example, is 8 to 10. You need to back up certain points with UPS because we are in a life-threatening situation, right? So wherever they say, you better do it. Don't cut short. There is no point in saving money. Then I might probably not put a Italian marble and use a brick which is created there and draping it with glass. Makes no sense to me actually. But I might do the other part of it, much better, because patient needs to be saved. Hinduja Hospital, which he showed, is a Kota stone, is one of the country's best hospital today, so that is not going to matter, what is it. So please keep that in. In terms of firefighting, now I didn't know this actually, that you also need an upright sprinkler. and many of the hospitals that have been in question for fire, is the fire actually started there, so I think there is a norm. He would probably know it better, some 800 if that space, then upright sprinkler is a must. I would suggest that you just go and do it, because nobody bothers about what is going to happen above the false ceiling. So we are now making it a practice to give that upright sprinkler. It is not going to cost you a bomb, but it will save you, when crisis happens. So that is something that we should not do away with. Then, a little bit about plumbing, something which we always forget. We say, ho jayega. Number of toilets, please, provide as per what is the need. We don't do that. Indian airports also notorious for something like that. So this is something which, and this cannot be done haphazardly, because we again have a problem of how this, to drain it and all of that. I hope everyone understands that STP is mandatory, for hospital systems. ETP has become mandatory for hospital systems, and you can't cut corner. I have had promoters, we said, no, we will manage, but that doesn't work. Okay. Also look at the advantage of it. You create water, all your hospitals are going to be centrally air conditioned. You like it or you don't like it, 60% will be air conditioned. Use the water, that's the way. So STP is a must, can never, go short on something like that. And then the other things where standards are reverse osmosis for dialysis and all, people like, them can guide you much better. So I think more or less structure is the only thing, where we have an issue generally. The beam depths and the other things. So, you guys are better equipped to handle something like that. So I think.
Yeah, very, very well answered. Sometimes I feel those old conventional hospitals which were built 5 decades before, where the land was available and every block was separate. It's a most sustainable design. You have a IPD, which is inpatient department, you have a OPD, you have a critical healthcare, and you have another things. So they were all connected with the corridors, because each of these boxes requires a different kind of an approach from MEP and its behavioral pattern. Today in modern architecture, we are pushed to stack them one or above. That's why these principles, what Rahul said, what you are saying, are very important.
One just quick, you can also think of the building 12 or 24 hours, because many of these functions work like this. Came to my mind as you said, that OPD is administrative 12 hours and the other thing 24 hours. If you think like that,
yeah. So the challenge really in our urban hospitals is that all of them are stacked one or above. So we depend on the service floor, we depend on having a different kind of a zones within the one building. But ideally, if you have a larger land parcel, you can have independent boxes and connect them with a nice corridors. That makes a lot of sense, but you don't get that opportunity in urban context. I will move further, and again a question to Dr. Goyal. In today's age technology, digitization, and having some kind of IoT, he mentioned about having, it's all world about developing an app, having a strong communication system, we call about PAC, which is patient archiving systems. Can you just enlighten us, where is the new age technology moving towards and how is it influencing your operational benefits? I would just request all the panelists to be slightly brief, because we want to complete it in our 20 minutes. Yeah.
So I think, so technology is playing a major role. And I won't say it is really disruptive at this moment, but I see that it will happen very, very soon. And then this during the COVID times again, so we have seen a lot of technology coming and playing an important role. So telemedicine, for example, there was no real norms around telemedicine, teleconsultations previously. It was, and thanks to the government, so we now have regulation around that. So I believe the hospitals of future will have to integrate all these things. So telemedicine, consult is becoming a norm nowadays. A doctor wants to consult a patient right from their OPD chambers. It may be a physical consult, it may be a teleconsult as well. I think we'll have to integrate those things, and that is really playing a very, very important role nowadays. We are able to connect to more patients, which is good from a business perspective as well, and even from a clinical perspective. The patient is able to connect with the doctor more frequently without even physically traveling to the hospital. So that is one very important aspect that is coming into play. Secondly, the packs that you talked about. So that definitely is becoming a norm nowadays. Even small hospitals are also going for that. And the teleradiology, the reporting of the systems, everything is happening remotely as well. So which is kind of adding much more to the efficiency of the hospitals. So you get reports more quickly, so the doctors can access it on their mobiles. So there are apps that are now being developed by almost all hospitals, wherein you can access the patient information through the HIS systems, which are then integrated into your mobile phones. So your mobile phone and your smartphone actually becomes a source of a lot of information, and this information is then in real time. So you can make decisions there and then, communicate it back to your teams, and then the necessary interventions can be done. So those are things which are becoming more important, more critical. Another aspect which is there, which has been there for some years, but now is catching up, is the concept of remote monitoring. So be it in an outpatient or a home environment, or even in a hospital setting as well. So there are collaborations that are being built in terms of setting up tele-ICUs. Now, critical care was one of the main areas of focus during the COVID pandemic as well. We have seen the most of the patients who required critical care beds, they were not able to get it in the larger hospitals because they were saturated. There were no beds available. So, but there was spare capacity available at smaller hospitals, but there were no doctors to kind of take care of those patients. So, if we have technology now which can connect a small nursing home with a larger hospital, which can be the command center, and the hospital can then be the execution area. So that remote monitoring, the trained nurses sitting in the hospital and in the command center, the senior doctors there can actually do the regular monitoring and take immediate actions whenever a patient requires intervention. So those are some of the things which are happening on the clinical side. Even on the non-clinical side as well, there is a lot of automation that is now coming in. So we are seeing, we have seen some of those things, the automatic door closures and openers. So no touch things coming and becoming more important. And even in small little things as well, where there are so many touch points that are there. So we need to actually reduce those. And then infection, we already have heard something about that. And today, by the way, is World Hand Hygiene Day. So that is very, very important. Hygiene and infection controls is really, really important. That is where technology is coming into play. So we have now systems where you can tag your equipments or the instruments that you're using in operation theaters, and then you can see that they have gone to the CSSD, they have been sterilized, and then they're returned back. So those things can be monitored. So we have technology now which is being used for movement of patients within the hospital. That's called Uberization of the patient movement. So you can have RFIDs with the porters who can then be tracked, and they can get a ping on their mobile phone that is given to them so that they can reach to the patient immediately. And so that efficiency part increases, the waiting time for the patient reduces. So those are some of the things I believe that are happening already. But I feel that it is just the beginning. So there is much more that is going to happen in the healthcare space in terms of digitization and the role of technology going forward.
There is so much of a take home. You talked about remote monitoring, PACS, command center, telemedicine, touchless devices. I think that is very brilliant. And I would again urge all the four panelists, please take some time, which of course includes Rahul also, to put these great guidelines into some kind of a document. Of course, we are recording this program, and our idea is to create a small YouTube segments of this and make it viral on a social media, especially to the young minds, for them to know. But I think in this particular program of last 1.5 hours, there's so much of a great take home. Thank you very much for that. Now to Mr. Ramachandran, the question is passive design and an active design. So you have worked on so many healthcare facilities. I want you to take name of some case study so it becomes more relevant. How do you see the best combination of a intellect of a MEP stalwart like you and an architect giving his best? Do we really see that we have reached to that threshold where the passive planning has come to a complete to its apex, and now only the active planning should come in place? Or do we start developing a design program and have more dependency on active planning? You know, as the technology is bettering up, it's also bad for us because we don't really stretch our limits for a passive planning. So how do you do that when you have a design charrettes with your architects? Give us one case study or two case studies where it could reach to the best excellence.
Sandeep, rather I may not go to case study, but I will try to explain the point. See, the active design and passive design are certainly not substitutes for one another. They are complementary. They're complementary because for success in energy efficient design, you have to have active components also, passive components also. Now, I will limit my talk to only HVAC systems because HVAC consumes 45 to 50% of the energy consumption in a hospital. So it is very vital to reduce your HVAC power consumption. Now, how do you do that? A hospital is a 24/7 into 365 days working facility. And the loads can fluctuate like anything. If your peak air conditioning load is 1000 tons, the hospital may be required to operate for a long time at just 100 or 150 tons. So your whatever systems are going into the hospital should be able to take care of these varying loads. Fortunately, that is with technology, that is all possible these days because we are having, say for example, chillers. We are having chillers with variable frequency drives. We are even having magnetic levitation chillers which work with absolutely no lubricating oil in the system. These are all extremely energy saving devices. And in a hospital, the payback will be in 2-3 years, you will get the payback for all this additional expenditure. Similarly, same goes for your pumping systems, your cooling towers. All these equipments are available with control gear, which makes them adaptable for these fluctuating loads. So in a hospital, it is very, very necessary to have this kind of systems installed. Now, there are, especially with the COVID situation, we have also come across the requirement of absolutely good filtration systems in hospital. Now, filtration is something when you go into this small microns, like the virus particle size and all, filtration costs can be tremendously expensive. The option available to us now is use of, Dr. Desai showed in one of his slides, ultraviolet germicidal irradiation, what we call UVGI. By combining UVGI with conventional filtration, you can reduce your energy consumption for clean air significantly. Now, these are some of the active points. There are many more, but I would not like to go into all that. Now, coming to the passive points are equally important. See, when you design a hospital, if you're basically doing a green design, you naturally go for the most optimum orientation for the building with respect to the sun path. Then again, Mr. Architect Hiten Sethi just explained to what all lengths he went to reduce the transmission ingress into the building by designing the facade. The facade, what we call the building envelope, is very, very important. Then another point which I would like to highlight here, again, Dr. Desai mentioned that in passing, we should be very clear what are the 24-hour areas, what are the 8-hour areas, what are the 12-hour areas in a hospital. By combining them intelligently, you will be able to stop or cut down most of the equipment running when it is not necessary. That is a great energy saving. Again, one more thing, don't take pride to say that my hospital is 100 completely air conditioned. There is no percentage in that. In the area which is critical for patient care, for patient well-being, for patient cure, air conditioned. But the corridor, now we are talking about wide corridors and all that. Corridors, reception area, even outpatient waiting, whichever area can do with good ventilation, go with good ventilation. Don't go for air conditioning. Similarly, wherever possible, go for this evaporative cooling systems. Where the climate permits that, go for evaporative cooling, which will again save a lot of energy which otherwise will be used for air conditioning. These are some of the passive design steps which can cut down your energy bill significantly. And this is the need of the day.
Good. I think that was a very relevant answer. Just to take this thread ahead, I would suggest and request all of you to go and see a TED talk by Kamal Mittal. You know, Kamal Mittal, Dr. Kamal Mittal, who has developed more than 38 indigenous plants. You know, he is a case study at Paharpur, business center at Paharpur. So what he has done, that he has got more than 30 species of indigenous plants which are kept on his terrace. The return air of the air conditioning goes through that particular greenhouse and it purifies the air. And I was stunned to witness that the PM12 and PM2 level outside was filtered to the extent of 96%, 24/7, just the power of a plant. With the minimum, we talk about 30 air changes, we talk about MRV, 13 filters and 8 filters, but this is something which is brilliant. Please have a look at his TED talk, Kamal Mittal. It's an eye-opener, because, and that happens 24/7 in that particular business center at Paharpur.
Sandeep, I have heard about this building.
Yes.
In Delhi it is.
It's fantastic building.
Yeah, I heard about, though I have not seen
You
that.
must go there. He keeps a chart on his table for all the people who visit, and that chart has a recording of every day's the air quality parameters. Also, the water that you drink there is having a fantastic pH value. They grow their own agriculture and they eat everyday fresh food. A best style of living in most polluted area of India in Delhi, Paharpur. Absolutely convincing technology. Okay, a quick one to Ranjith and then the last one with Dr. Desai. Ranjith, actually you covered most of the aspect which I was trying. Just quickly tell us about the color temperature, how an architect should select a color temperature, especially in healthcare, and what are the new age technologies that they can adapt. Automation is what everybody knows, digital dimming everybody knows, but is there anything more than that you would like to educate the fraternity over here, especially focusing on healthcare?
Yeah, sure. So just to what Mr. Ramachandran was saying, the HVAC controls and lighting controls these days are quite, we use the same type of sensors also, because now even with green buildings, you get a point for using occupancy sensors and daylight sensors. So the same kind of energy saving strategies, what is followed in an HVAC systems can be followed in a lighting system. For example, clearly zoning, for example, inpatient corridors. You have huge amount of corridors. At what time are patients coming in? What time are doctors coming in? If you can actually zone and plan this, the lighting sequences can be planned and hence a lot of energy saving can be achieved. I think from a design perspective, something that you cannot avoid in any space for that matter is the use of occupancy sensors and daylight sensors. Now I saw projects of Hiten and Rahul with a lot of daylight harvesting and they have done a lot of detailed analysis. So that's key. Now coming to your point about color temperature, illuminance, automation, and circadian system.
So we know cool white, warm white and daylight white.
Yeah.
So quickly, can you differentiate?
So I would say like 10 years back, all these were independent elements. If you were to adjust the illuminance through some dimming systems, you couldn't play with the color temperatures because that was an independent element. Like if you wanted to, you had no option of tuning your color temperatures. But today with LEDs, everything has become interrelated. You can tune everything. Like a graphic equalizer, in a given space, I can dim and brighten my light levels. I can go from a warm color temperature to a cool color temperature. So there is no more question for you as an architect to think, okay, what should I use? You can as well, if there is a budget, you can as well go for a tunable white LED source.
Awesome.
So that's purely okay. But imagine now, again, Mr. Desai was just putting up a slide where I saw 4,000 rupees a square feet is average cost. But tell me how much do we spend on lighting? 50 rupees? I mean, there's like old standards when I see people say 50 rupees, 60 rupees, 70 rupees for lighting. We are working at prehistoric levels because today technology has evolved so much and lighting can do so much. We are still looking at 50, 60 rupees square feet. You have 4,000 rupees. I'm shocked. And you are still giving me 50 to 60 rupees to work out. And then there is value engineering and all those time and effort we put in. You have to look at around 150 rupees today, in today's terms, to get a decent amount of lighting. 150 and plus, I would say. Because just imagine today a hospital is just not for healthcare. It's actually a destination, right?
Dr. Goyal is listening to you. He will put it in the next budget for the upgradation of all Fortis hospitals. Yeah.
Correct. So
no, but I do agree with you. Yes. Go ahead.
Today, hospital is a destination actually because you have NRIs coming in, you have patient, and it's no more the India of prehistoric times where only you're looking at charity and old poor people and hospitals are very stark in design. Today we are all on a real high. Look at the amount of the material like Korean he's using for external. I have seen projects with the entire facade is Italian marble cladded, but then lighting is just 1,000 rupee downlights with a anti, too much of glare. If I even ask for a proper diffuser, it goes through procurement problems, and the stories are huge. But let me give you when you coming to your point, let me just take a patient's room, like an inpatient room as a case study, and look at how color, temperature, and the whole thing works. Now, I just formulated this. So let's say at 6 a.m. a patient, kind of somebody who's admitted, wakes up. Now, what's the ideal situation? If you can have some bit of automation, you can have a timer. 6 a.m. your blinds can go up, so that there is a little bit of filtering of daylight coming in, the very early sunlight, the tweaks of sunlight. There is also that the patient can see outside. That's biophilia. Like when a patient actually sees green and able to really look into the horizon, that itself is a very healing feeling, So your blind should come up at 6 a.m. and slowly your light levels should maybe start at a warmer tone, like 3000 Kelvin. And as the day approaches to around 11 a.m., from 3000 you ramp it up to around 6500 K. So why I say 6500 K is because your daylight is typically in the 6500 to 10,000 K at 11 a.m. sunlight. That's the color temperature typically. So today you have technology that the lighting itself, in your electrical lighting itself can automatically be programmed to move from a warm tone to this cool tone incrementally, not like a immediate change, but as the day evolves, you program it. So the patient is also in sync with what's happening outside. Now this can be like a thumb of, it cannot like a rule of the thumb, because most inpatient rooms might have some certain sofas, they might have a lot of drapes, so you don't know, it might change with certain designs. So that's something which you can think about. So here you are now playing with even the light levels can move from 200 lux and it can go up to around 800 lux, because now it's again. So and now this is also helping your circadian system. If at all the patient is not having enough daylight coming in at that point, because of the increased lux levels of 800 to 1000 and your increased CCT of 6000, 7000, automatically it's kind of giving cues to your body that you are in a bright zone.
Yeah, in a nutshell, you are talking about the controllability. Yes, of course, that sounds very good, and I think that emerging science has been very well accepted by the healthcare industry. That's beautiful. I would really request all of you AT lighting designers to again develop a healthcare guidelines, develop a healthcare lighting master plan. It's a need of an hour. I think that would be then adopted by the entire industry. Thank you very much. Due to paucity of time, I'm kind of intervening, but I think a lot of people can meet you offline. You're going to be here for next 2-3 days, and there's a lot that needs to be learned from you, lighting.
Architect who's building the facility, the person who is going to run the facility, and the MEP consultant and others. So everybody has a role to play in making it a safe place.
Yes, I do agree with you. Yes,
one
please,
more point here.
please.
Yeah, I think so. The hospital at the design phase should actually incorporate all these guidelines from NABH and JCI, because typically even a 50-bedded hospital nowadays is going for NABH. Much smaller hospitals require NABH because they have to be in panel with insurance companies or some other common schemes. So I think that is where the designing part probably may incorporate all these requirements from NABH. While these are taken from like the Shikre guidelines and others, these are already there, but those are segregated. NABH just consolidates them at a hospital level, and I think if those can be actually looked into, considered at the design phase itself, I think it will take care of a lot of these issues of air quality, and not just air quality, the sustainability and other things as well.
Very, very well said.
One quick thing, because this is iDAC, you guys should get us some green building concession or some rebate in our electricity charges if we go green.
Okay, let me quickly address you. You touched the point, because everything that needs to be quantified and that needs to be recognized and that needs to be incentivized. So we have already won this battle. Out of many states, I think 70% of the states have agreed that all the IGBC gold and platinum rated certified, especially the healthcare, this is for you also, will have a special concessional rate for their energy metering, and they will also have a special facility in their assessment values, and they will get an additional FSI, 5% for silver, 7% for gold, and 9% for platinum. So
That's
this,
excellent.
yes, this scheme is already there. So and we are now trying to reach this to all states. All states have not agreed, but 60% of the states have agreed. So you're actually touched the point, because it needs to have that kind of a recognition and incentive. Absolutely. And very well said by Dr. Goyal that pre-design stage is an important stage in healthcare. Like such a wonderful guiding principle Rahul explained, Hitin explained. I think I'm thankful to all of you for being here, especially to Rahul and Nitin again.